Cleopatra, the most iconic woman in history. Her name is linked to power, beauty, and lethal femininity.
Like most historical figures, over time, her life looked more and more like a Hollywood movie, until it was one.
Archaeology reveals Cleopatra's long-buried secrets. Which part did she play in the battle over the ancient world? Lover and enemy. Her story is entwined with Rome's most powerful rulers.
She outsmarted the most powerful men on earth, and they could not find her.
It's not hate, it's I'm first and don't want to be second.
She was already a myth during her lifetime.
Every time we tell the story of Cleopatra, I think we're provoking the question, are women allowed to rule the world?
Unraveling the myth of the last queen of Egypt. Who was Cleopatra? The great myths of mankind, mysteries passed on over thousands of years, captivate and mystify us, fueling our imagination. What if the legends are more than fiction? Researchers across the globe are working to solve the greatest mysteries of our time. It's August 12th, 30 BC. Cleopatra has lost everything. Imprisoned in her own palace, defeated by her greatest enemy, Rome's future emperor Augustus. She takes her own life with the help of a poisonous snake. This is just one of the many legends surrounding Cleopatra. Which of them are true?
Cleopatra has an enduring fascination for us because her story embodies power and beauty and the rise and fall of dynasties and murder and sex. I mean, it has everything you would want in a Hollywood blockbuster.
Legends of the Queen have persisted for over 2,000 years, with Cleopatra being perhaps the most famous enigmatic figure in history. Today, she inspires women around the world, serving as a symbol of beauty, luxury, and femininity. But who was she really?
There are very few written sources that actually describe her and explain her, so what we really need is some archaeology to help unlock that puzzle.
Alexandria, in northern Egypt. One woman is on the hunt for clues. In 2005, Kathleen Martinez gives up her career as a lawyer to become an archaeologist. It is Queen Cleopatra who fascinates her.
I always loved Egypt, but once I went to my father's office and he was sitting there gathering with professors and intellectuals, and I asked for the book of Shakespeare, Antony and Cleopatra, and my father immediately and all his friends started speaking badly about the last queen of Egypt. At that moment, I could not reply to them, but I thought maybe they were all wrong.
The archaeologist is determined to find Cleopatra's tomb. She picks up the trail here in Alexandria. Hardly any traces remain of the once magnificent ancient metropolis.
This is where the royal quarters used to be, which were the citadel, a small city where the king and queens of Egypt, the pharaohs, used to live. And you could see probably at the entrance beautiful gardens. At the end, the palace of Queen Cleopatra, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea with gold, different colors of marble.
Literary sources claim that 1,000 years ago, earthquakes and tsunamis have caused severe damage, burying large parts of the ancient city of Alexandria. For a long time, Cleopatra's tomb is believed to lie at the bottom of the harbor. This is where underwater archaeologist Ahmad Khalil has been diving in search of ancient evidence.
Let's go this way. This is a unique site, actually.
Yeah.
There's no such thing anywhere else.
Exactly.
Diving here also is very impressive. When the visibility is good, it's amazing. It's like going back to history.
For the past 3 decades, archaeologists have been retrieving evidence, 2,000-year-old testimonials of ancient Alexandria. They find over 3,000 pieces belonging to the famous ancient lighthouse Pharos, fragments of statues, obelisks, columns, and foundations which once bore palaces and temples.
What was found there are foundations, floors basically. And floors could be related to any building. From studying these foundations, we can date them to the Hellenistic or the Ptolemaic period, the reign of the Ptolemies.
The Ptolemies succeeded Alexander the Great. After his death, they take on many Egyptian customs and traditions, crown themselves god-kings, and transform Alexandria into a center of knowledge and progression. From 332 BC, the Ptolemies rule Egypt for over 300 years. Cleopatra was the last of the dynasty. No tomb of a member of the Ptolemies has ever been found. But could Cleopatra's tomb be in Alexandria?
It seems that she was buried somewhere around where she lived, around the royal quarters, could be. But there's no concrete evidence to link the ancient royal quarters to the tomb of Cleopatra.
Ancient sources reveal very little. 100 years after Cleopatra's death, the Greco-Roman historian Plutarch writes,
And she herself, now that she had a tomb and monument built surpassingly lofty and beautiful, which she had erected near the temple of Isis.
Plutarch does not name coordinates, but for Kathleen's search, this passage indeed proves useful.
I believe she wanted to die not as a prisoner as she was. She wanted to die as a goddess. And it was the beginning of a religious act that will end up with her being buried in a temple. But where?
Scenes on Egyptian temple walls suggest that Cleopatra mirrored herself as goddess Isis. To ancient Egyptians, Isis was the supreme female deity. She was the protector and the mother, and a magical healer who could resurrect the dead.
Cleopatra wanted to be the queen mother of Egypt. Pharaohs ascended to the throne as Horus, son of Isis. Isis is a myth of feminine power. She's brilliant, nurturing, sexual, and dignified. So too was Cleopatra.
Cleopatra rules Egypt for 21 years. During this time, she most likely had a tomb erected in order to fulfill her role as God Queen and protector of the people in the afterlife.
She collected there the most valuable of the royal treasures: gold, silver, emeralds, pearls, ebony, ivory, and cinnamon.
Those are the words of Plutarch. Kathleen means to find those treasures, along with Cleopatra's mummy. After studying ancient texts, Kathleen investigates 21 possible burial sites outside Alexandria. In one of them, she strikes gold. Barely 50 kilometers from Alexandria lies Taposiris Magna.
And this is my office.
Taposiris Magna stands for the Great Tomb of Osiris. Back in the 18th century, even Napoleon is said to have excavated here. But apart from the foundation walls, he found nothing. In 2005, Kathleen Martinez starts the dig and finds some small tablets in Greek script.
In the moment we were able to discover the foundation plates, and the foundation plates refer who built this temple and which year, and the dedication to the temple to Isis, everything changed here. And even everything that has been written before us was wrong.
Digging within the walls of Taposiris Magna, Kathleen unearths what appears to be the hallmarks of a temple of goddess Isis. And in the rubble of this shrine, archaeologists find over 200 bronze coins. Many of them bear Cleopatra's image. Kathleen also finds a head of a small Cleopatra statue, another tantalizing link to the last queen of Egypt.
If she would have the opportunity to choose a place to be buried, I believe she would choose Tapas Iris Magna. I am convinced this temple was the most important religious temple for Goddess Isis in the north of Egypt. And Cleopatra was the human representation of Goddess Isis.
Kathleen is convinced the living Isis once chose to be buried beneath an Isis temple.
Archaeology is a science, and science is based on facts, but I hugely admire anyone who has a new theory, who seeks to find new facts. I actually very much hope that Kathleen Martinez is right. And if she's right, it would be a discovery as great as the finding of Tutankhamun's tomb.
The discovery of her tomb could also unravel further myths on Cleopatra, passed on by the Greco-Roman writers.
She was so lustful that she often offered herself as a prostitute, so beautiful that many bought one of her nights with death.
The image of the seducing beauty has been handed down through centuries.
Like most historical figures, over time, her life looked more and more like a Hollywood movie, until it was one.
In 1963, Elizabeth Taylor plays Cleopatra. It becomes a worldwide hit. She embodies a woman who uses her sexuality to seduce Rome's most powerful men. A myth that emerged due to Cleopatra's encounter with Julius Caesar in 48 BC. It all started with Cleopatra's brother and co-regent claiming the throne. Egypt descends into civil war. Rome's troops, led by Julius Caesar, occupy Alexandria, attempting to restore order to the Egyptian throne. In the dead of night, the young queen smuggles herself into Caesar's chambers, hoping to gain favor. This is the story recounted by Roman historians. What specifically happened that night remains unwritten. What we do know is Caesar reinstates Cleopatra as queen at the side of her second, younger brother.
The relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar is very much mutually beneficial. So on the one hand, Cleopatra gets to secure her kingdom. Roman soldiers, Roman security keeps Egypt safe. And in return, Caesar gets ships, he gets grain, and that allows him to finance his wars and his continued conquests.
Allies become lovers. Cleopatra not only retrieves her throne, she becomes pregnant with Caesar's child. Only 1 year after their first encounter, Caesar fathers his only son. Cleopatra has him portrayed on the temple walls of Dendera. His name, Ptolemy Caesar, a name that should leave no doubt that Caesar is the father.
For the Romans, this was a scandal, and then Caesar even invites his mistress and their son to Rome.
2 years after their meeting in Alexandria, Caesar brings the Egyptian queen and her son to Rome. She holds court in one of Caesar's villas and seeks to win over Rome's political leaders with festivities. She becomes the talk of the town. According to ancient historians, Cleopatra speaks Greek, Egyptian, and 7 other languages. Her high level of education and eloquence stands out.
Being brilliant to look upon and to listen to, with the power to subjugate everyone, even a love-sated man already past his prime.
One of the tropes that comes up again and again is that she is exotic, she is other, she is dangerous and fascinating.
The cunning Egyptian queen, exploiting male weaknesses to secure her throne. This is how artists often portrayed her in the years that followed. But do these paintings show the real Cleopatra?
The portraits and paintings of Cleopatra across different epochs differ so much because each one is reflecting different intentions. It might be that it's reflecting attitudes towards female rulers, or that it's something to do with attitudes towards Egypt, ancient Egypt, and how that's being viewed. So depending on where and when she's being depicted, her portrait changes.
At times, she's presented black-haired, at others brunette, sometimes innocent or seductive. Every era portrays a different Cleopatra.
We've inherited an idea of Cleopatra as having this dark black hair cut in a nice sharp bob. One source for this comes from the 1920s Egyptomania that took place. Howard Carter had discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. Everyone across the world was going crazy for the fashions, the style that was coming out of Egypt. But there's another reason that we have this idea of her, and that could be the relief carvings from ancient Egypt, which tend to stylize female pharaohs in that way, showing the hair short and in profile.
But what did she really look like? One of the very few portraits of Cleopatra from her time is on display in the collection of classical antiquities in Berlin. Did the last queen look like this?
The image is a little unsettling, I would say. It's not what you expect when you compare it with Liz Taylor's portrayal of Cleopatra in the famous Hollywood film, for example, or the character in Asterix. Here we have a somewhat rather brittle figure before us.
This head is one of two plastics dating back to Cleopatra's time. The other one is in the possession of the Vatican. Stylized coin images helped archaeologists to identify her.
One feature is the royal diadem, this thick band typical for Hellenistic rulers, then her hairstyle, known as a melon hairstyle, and then specific features of her profile as well. Her nose, for example, which curves forward a little, her lower lip protruding somewhat further forward than the upper lip, plus the large eyes. These are all features which are particularly characteristic of Cleopatra VII.
But how realistic is this portrait?
There are no written sources showing whether a statesman, a queen, or a commander ever sat for a sculptor. It is rather unlikely, but we can assume that everyone was aware of some of the more notable features. These people certainly appeared in public. They sometimes also presented themselves to the people in ritual acts, for example, and then it was possible to get an impression of what they looked like.
What if the sculptor had never met the legendary queen in person? Could they have created a truthful image of the queen, using only a mere description? What if an experiment could prove this theory? Facial composite artist Liana Bellman is specialized at drawing faces of people working only with a description. She is to draw two facial composites of one person. The first description comes from the model herself. The second, from another person. If the two drawings are alike, it would strengthen the theory that the portrait in Berlin actually resembles Cleopatra.
I would describe them as almond-shaped. And the outer tip?
Very, very big eyes, definitely. Curving slightly to the back.
A little higher than the inside one. My face is quite narrow, but I don't have a pointy chin.
It's quite a long face, with very narrow nostrils.
No, my bottom lip is thicker.
The cheekbones are definitely a little higher.
The lower third of the ear is definitely exposed.
So, the parting is here.
Yes, it goes slightly to the left.
Hair falling forward behind the ear and then pulled back.
3 hours and 2 facial composites later. How similar are the two portraits? And how realistic?
Ja, krass, wie so
Wow, like two versions of myself.
chin and jaw, they fit perfectly.
Yes, true. I think the nose is quite similar.
Yes, the nose is good as well.
But I had to laugh when it came to my nose because he basically described it exactly as I did.
One face, two images. The sketches are different, but the main features are the same. The narrow nose, the large eyes, the pronounced jawbone are identical in both images. And we also find them in the model's face. The experiment shows the marble bust in Berlin could depict Cleopatra's main features. It's essentially an ancient facial composite of the pharaoh. Not quite like a photograph, but still true to life. Maybe even more than that. A mural from Pompeii also shows her hair, skin, and eye color. It was painted at the same time Cleopatra was probably residing in Rome. This is what she might have looked like. The true face of Cleopatra?
The expectations of portraits really have changed across time. Today, we'd expect a portrait to be a recognizable, lifelike rendering of a person, their exact face. But that really wasn't the case in antiquity. Portraiture then was more about what the person represents, what they symbolize. Really, we won't know exactly what she looked like in real life unless we were to discover her skeleton.
Kathleen Martinez hopes to find this skeleton. Over 15 years ago, she started looking for tunnels and secret passageways below the ruined Taposiris Magna temple.
At the beginning, the Ministry of Antiquities, they laughed. They said, it's impossible. I said, no, because if you haven't found those tunnels yet, that doesn't mean they don't exist. I will find them.
And indeed, 10 years ago, she uncovered a shaft leading 25 meters underground. In total, the archaeologist exposes 17 vertical shafts, some of them leading to single tunnels, others part of a larger tunnel complex.
Every time we go down to this tunnel, we can die. And the way down, the process is really very dramatic. If we can safely go down, then there's many dangers down there, like snakes, all of them poison, and you can die in 10 minutes down there if you get by.
Over 2,000 years ago, these passages were cut into the rock by workers. High and wide enough to stand upright, or transport a sarcophagus.
After we started excavating, I became more and more excited about the possibility of these tunnels leading me to the tomb of Queen Cleopatra.
The supply of oxygen is limited. Workers can only excavate 2 hours at a time. This slows down the whole process. They can only dig 5 meters a day at most.
For me, cleaning, excavating has taken 10 years. Imagine what it took to build and make this temple by hand. How many workers they use here? And what was the purpose?
The hope of making a big discovery grows with every meter dug.
They're hiding something. That's why we're ready here to risk our life. I believe once we finish excavating this tunnel, at the end, we will get what I've been searching for.
The search for a phantom, or a much-desired answer to the question, who was Cleopatra?
I think we
want to get a hold of Cleopatra, to kind of take hold of who she really was. And when you look at the historical story of Cleopatra, she is genuinely compelling because she is a woman trying to assert herself as a ruler in a world dominated by men. And the ways that she does that are intriguing.
Cleopatra, a scandalous beauty from distant Egypt, whom powerful men cannot resist. Was it her political relationship with Rome that shaped her reputation? Rome in 46 BC. Caesar has a temple built to Venus. A golden statue of the goddess Isis inside the temple has Cleopatra's face and shows her naked. Today, only ruins remain to bear witness to the political scandal.
We've lost an original image of her that was commissioned by Caesar and made while she was still alive of solid gold. Now, that particular statue made the Roman Senate absolutely furious that the Caesar would lavish that amount of attention and solid gold on Cleopatra.
The new museum in Berlin houses a collection of over 60,000 antique documents. Historian Marius Gerhardt is investigating the few remaining written documents from the Roman Empire. Might they reveal Cleopatra's true character? A letter from the powerful Senator Cicero, one of Caesar's adversaries, clearly indicates the impression Cleopatra leaves on the Romans.
In this letter, Cicero writes, "Reginam odi, I hate the queen." He is referring to Cleopatra, and he goes on talking in a more general fashion about why that is. Indeed, for many Romans, Cleopatra was a queen who heavily depended on Rome, but ascended to the confidant of the all-powerful Caesar and suddenly acts as if she were the ruler of the Roman Empire.
Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra and her stay in Rome suits his opponents. Since his thirst for power has long been a thorn in their side, they finally feel strong enough to put their murderous plot into action.
Rome was a republic. The thought of a royal ruler was abhorrent to them. But that's exactly how Caesar presented himself to Rome, with Cleopatra at his side.
On March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar is murdered. He is betrayed by his most trusted confidants. A power struggle breaks out in Rome. Cleopatra is no longer safe. She flees the city. So long as the Roman Republic is preoccupied with itself, Cleopatra consolidates her power in Egypt. Her brother, whom Caesar had installed as a pharaoh at Cleopatra's side, dies under mysterious circumstances.
It's said that he was poisoned and that Cleopatra herself was behind it because he was the only male relative who could dispute her power.
She elevates her 3-year-old son, Caesar's heir, to co-ruler. The god queen, ruling like a man, thus becomes a man-killing seductress, adulteress, and royal whore. This is how Cleopatra will be portrayed by artists after her death.
Every time you tell the story of Cleopatra, it shows women how powerful they can be. And it's exactly because she's such a complete and empowered woman that she gets dismissed and demonized throughout history.
She now rules independently in her country, reforms the administration, and reduces taxes. The new museum in Berlin discloses rare documents from her reign.
This text, this royal decree, shows very clearly how she cared for the people.
At the time, Egypt is plagued by famines. To avoid riots in the capital, grain distribution must be specifically regulated. The decree bans officials from taking farmers from the fields to work for them.
This document, compared with the literary sources on Cleopatra's reign, suggests she was a very rational and level-headed ruler. This document definitely does not portray her as the seductress we see described elsewhere, particularly by Plutarch.
Another document exempts a Roman businessman from paying any tax, presumably buying his loyalty.
She was obviously trying to form a network to establish connections in Rome. But what we can certainly assume is that if the Ptolemaic kingdom had had a weaker ruler, it would have become a Roman province much earlier. Cleopatra was very successful. She eventually failed, but for a long time she was able to hold and stabilize a country in constant danger of becoming a Roman province.
After Caesar's death, civil war rages in Rome. His most loyal commander, Mark Antony, joins forces with Caesar's adopted son and nephew, 19-year-old Octavian. Finally, they defeat their opponents and the victors share power in the empire. Octavian rules in the west, Mark Antony controls the east, including Egypt.
Mark Antony and Octavian are both heirs to Caesar, and initially it appears that they're happy to share power. On the outside, they make it seem that way, but on the inside, they know that there can only really be one person. And Mark Antony makes the move to replicate what Caesar had done, so he sides with Cleopatra.
Their first meeting goes down in Roman history.
She provided herself with many gifts and money, but she went putting her greatest confidence in herself and in the charms and sorceries of her own person.
The commander is unable to resist.
At first, this was all about politics and not pleasure. Both sides saw something in each other that was valuable to them. For Antony, he needed help with his wars in the east, particularly against the Parthians. He needed Egyptian supplies and grain and money. And Cleopatra, well, she needed the political support of the most important man in Rome to consolidate her power and perhaps even expand her kingdom.
The ruler demands a price for giving herself to Mark Antony. According to Roman accounts, Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe was in exile in Ephesus. She was the only person who could still dispute her throne.
She was also by nature very covetous and stuck at no wickedness. She had already poisoned her brother, and this when he was but 15 years old, and she got her sister Arsinoe to be slain by the means of Antony.
Is this just Roman propaganda? For a long time, people doubted the accuracy of the story. The ruins of ancient Ephesus in today's Turkey. In 1926, archaeologists found an unknown tomb here. Martin Steska leads the current excavation.
Being buried within the city is a privilege. One of the longest standing laws ever prohibits being buried in the city. Being buried here means this is a very important person.
There are no inscriptions and no indication of who was buried here. But in 2009, archaeologists managed to scan the remaining 170 stone fragments of the tomb and reconstruct it digitally.
The architectural design resembles the middle story of the lighthouse of Alexandria. That means it is very reminiscent of Egyptian architecture.
Until its destruction, the Pharos Lighthouse was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It represents the reign of the Ptolemies. Could a member of that family really be buried here? The tomb was erected between 50 and 20 BC, during Cleopatra's reign. The bones are now stored in the excavation camp's archive. The skeleton is no longer complete. Its skull is missing. But even without the head, the bones reveal valuable information.
On the long bones, you can see very clearly that the growth plates are not yet completely closed. This indicates that the person isn't yet an adult. And you can clearly identify a relatively wide birth canal. This indicates that the skeleton belongs to a woman.
The bones, their age, and the place of their discovery lead Martin Steskal to an inevitable conclusion.
Gathering all the evidence, I believe that we can safely assume, it's perhaps 90% likely, that these are the human remains of Cleopatra's sister.
This would make these the only remains ever found from a member of the Ptolemies. Do they really belong to Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe?
A potential danger is simply being removed, as it is quite common in family dynasties. Cleopatra expressed this desire to Mark Antony, and he made it a reality.
Roman accounts tell tales of a passionate love pact. A story that fuels the imagination of painters and writers to this day. Being in Alexandria, Mark Antony enjoys the sweet life. Cleopatra offers him wealth, luxury, glamour, and sex, and bears him 3 more children.
They were inseparable companions and lovers and developed a taste for hunting, playing dice and drinking together. On several occasions, they even went on nocturnal escapades around the streets dressed as slaves. They set up lavish banquets for each other. Money was no object.
During excavations in Alexandria and other ancient digging sites, archaeologists keep coming across traces of the ruling couple. Historian Christoph Schäfer has collected many of them. This Roman dinar, for example, probably minted in 36 BC. Cleopatra is depicted on one side, Mark Antony on the other, a unique design.
The fact that this sort of coin was even minted shows how close the two were. Here, you can see how they link their destinies and see each other as completely reliable partners. Otherwise, this kind of coin would never have been minted.
Mark Antony and Cleopatra certainly become partners, proclaiming more than just their love through this coin.
Boundaries are being crossed here. It's not unusual to have 2 rulers depicted on one coin, but here you have a Roman general on one side and an Egyptian pharaoh on the other. 2 empires being made into one by a simple coin.
According to ancient writings, Mark Antony even transfers huge parts of his dominion to his lover and their children. The Roman provinces of Libya, Crete, Cyprus, extensive lands in Syria and the Arabian Peninsula, and the Levant coast. For 250 years, no member of the Ptolemies had ruled over an empire of this size. The last pharaoh of Egypt is now at the pinnacle of her power. The Egyptians worship Mark Antony and Cleopatra as reincarnations of the gods Isis and Osiris.
Looking at Cleopatra's actions, she is acting entirely in the sense of national interest, as a clever ruler. But the Romans were probably not all enthusiastic about the close ties between Antony and Cleopatra. There were concerns that the queen's influence would change Rome.
Octavian's chance has come to defeat his adversary Mark Antony and win the battle for Rome.
Evidently, Octavian's goal was to rule alone. At this time, he already controlled Italy, and he breached the treaties he had concluded with Antony, and of course greatly damaged Antony's reputation with his propaganda.
Octavian turns the Senate against Mark Antony.
Who would not lament at seeing that Antony has now abandoned all his ancestors' habits of life and pays homage to a wench as if she were a goddess?
We Romans, lords of the greatest and best portion of the world, should be trodden underfoot by an Egyptian woman?
Foul allegations butt from both sides. Antony replies accordingly, a wild mudslinging which ends in civil war.
A war which does not last long. In the late summer of 31 BC, a naval battle takes place off the west coast of Greece, which will prove decisive. Octavian faces Mark Antony and Cleopatra with their fleets in the Bay of Actium. With 270 ships against 400, Antony and Cleopatra are outnumbered by Octavian's fleet. The heat and lack of fresh supplies cause an increasing number of soldiers to fall ill and die from hunger and disease. Mark Antony's advisors recommend he give up the fleet, but he chooses differently. The couple flee. This is how artists of past eras have depicted this decisive battle for supremacy of the Roman Empire.
The Battle of Actium is very clearly transposed into artistic mediums. What you see are representations of the brave Roman legions fighting on in the face of adversary, while Antony and Cleopatra are fleeing. They are running away.
Later, this will be the reason why Mark Antony's legions turn their back on him.
Hello, Constantino.
Nice
How
to see
are
you.
you?
It was from this hill that Octavian is said to have closely watched the battle. He recorded it later in his memoirs. The battle begins at midday. Several thousand soldiers lose their lives, and Mark Antony loses a huge part of his fleet. He flees with Cleopatra back to Egypt. Octavian describes his victory over the world in great detail. But could it have happened differently? Christoph Schäfer has been looking at today's sea currents, which help him understand what really happened in that battle.
We have a current from the north to the south, along the coast, a current.
The ships are said to have waited for several hours in one formation. But according to Schäfer, this cannot be true.
That's not possible. If you have currents, these ships have to maneuver, to hold position. Plutarch and Cassius-Dio, they're describing land battles, and not a sea battle.
Mark Antony and Cleopatra break through. They manage to escape to Alexandria and secure the valuable war chest. This is something that Octavian will later conceal.
Everything is a propaganda glorifying his victory and trying to present that his victory was a great victory. In reality, it was not a great battle.
There is no fleeing. The cowardice and fleeing are just defamation. This is how you discredit an enemy whom you are unable to turn in.
As the final touch to his war propaganda, Octavian erects a gigantic monument celebrating his victory. And the irreversibly ruined reputation of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Now they lose the support of their allies. Mark Antony's legions defect to Octavian.
The outcome of the Battle of Actium and the way that that's preserved down the centuries shows how powerful propaganda can be. It can bring a kingdom to its knees, but it can also shape legacy. So really, all we have about Cleopatra down to the modern day was formulated as a result of that event.
Less than a year after the Battle of Actium, Octavian stands before Alexandria with his army. Mark Antony and Cleopatra are now at his mercy. In despair, Mark Antony falls on his sword. Octavian plans to show off Cleopatra as a trophy in the triumph to Rome. To avoid this humiliation, she also takes her life. If indeed by the bite of a poisonous snake, remains her secret.
But Octavian Caesar, although vexed at the death of the woman, admired her lofty spirit, and he gave orders that her body should be buried with that of Antony in splendid and regal fashion.
Could he have buried Cleopatra and Taposiris Magna before the gates of Alexandria? 500 meters east of the ruined temple stands a miniature version of the Pharos lighthouse. Here in 2007, archaeologists found human remains and a huge burial site. A discovery that exceeds all expectations. This chamber points towards the temple. Could the mummies of Cleopatra and Mark Antony be buried here? When Kathleen opens it, she discovers several cavities in the west and north wall. No signs of splendid wealth. Although looted by robbers, the tomb still reveals some treasures. Human remains which are carefully being excavated.
Wow, I find the femur.
You found a femur?
Yes. It's too fragile, but we can see textile he made. That means that it was a mummy. But
Yes.
it's very destroyed.
So we found remains of mummy. It was a mummy. Sometimes scattered bones. We have discovered still golden tongues. We have discovered amulets. But this is for sure remains of the mummification.
Archaeologists rarely find mummies. Why? Not everyone in ancient Egypt was mummified. Mummification is a very time-consuming process. The dead body needs to be dried out. This supposedly stops the decaying process and helps the soul find the body, even in the afterlife. Mummification is a privilege and only reserved for nobility and priests.
Mummification is about preparing a pharaoh for a successful journey through the afterlife, which was all but impossible. Most will be lost to the chaos. But if the pharaoh made it through, they could take the hand of those who had been lost, and they could save everyone else. Cleopatra, as Isis, was almost certainly mummified, as she was seen as a protectress for souls in the underworld.
Are these Cleopatra's remains?
You can see it was a poor type of mummification. It was made in a hurry. And this kind of mummification is usually from the time of Queen Cleopatra. It was the end of Egypt as an empire, and they went in a hurry to prepare the mummy. So this is good for my theory.
Then Kathleen Martinez and her team find something unusual.
There is something important.
Look.
A lead to Cleopatra?
We have to see if it has inscriptions or it has any kind of drawings. We don't know yet. I am dying to turn it around, but I have to follow the procedures. Keep. Wow! It's an offering table. Look, it's like representing this tomb with the stairs. Wow, it's beautiful. Wow.
An offering table like this was filled with food and drink to supply the dead in the afterlife.
I am the first one in 2,000 years touching this offering table. It's an amazing feeling. They could put beer, wine, honey for the disease.
This sort of relic is not rare, but Kathleen believes this one could lead to Cleopatra's tomb. She has the find examined by independent experts.
Unfortunately, no description.
Yes, but only powerful people,
Exactly.
rich people
Yes,
will have offering tables.
Have the money to make tombs like this and have offering table inside it, yes. Exactly. They are not common people, you know.
Someone like the last queen of Egypt?
No, we don't have any archaeological evidence this will be her tomb, but I'm expecting to have like Tutankhamun's tomb that was found untouched. This is what I'm expecting.
It is possible that the deceased in these tombs could have known Cleopatra during her reign.
That must mean something. And I think it's because they have some information. And these tombs here are pointing to the tomb of Queen Cleopatra.
The tomb hasn't yet been found, but Kathleen is convinced it is only a matter of time. Archaeological findings help us understand the story of the last queen of Egypt. The real Cleopatra, a powerful strategist, a politically calculating seductress, a god queen overshadowing everyone around her.
History will never give us all the answers, but I think that's where the power lies, because we can fill in those blanks with what we want her to be. We create her anew every time we tell her story.
The myth of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, has endured for over 2,000 years. A fascinating story, both beautiful and tragic. Unless we find her tomb, her life remains a myth.